Bill Spencer, the household chef, and tonight we're going to make deep fried cheese curds. This is part of my new travel inspired dishes, and I spent many long layovers in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I always seem to be on a mission to try as many cheese curd recipes as possible. So on one 30-hour layover, I think I went to 5 different places trying cheese curds. I love those things. Anyway, I asked a lot of questions, and the 2 most important things I learned were, 1, use beer in your batter, and not just any beer. Use a beer that you would drink, that you like. And I'm in New York today, so I have a New York IPA. And the other most important thing I learned was to keep your cheese curds refrigerated, and then about 30 minutes before you're going to put them into the batter, put them in the freezer to get them hard. Not necessarily frozen solid, but you want them hard so that when you do drop them in the oil, they don't just melt out. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and I'm going to add the dry ingredients to this mixing bowl first. This is to make the batter. So here I have a cup of flour, just all-purpose flour. And then I have a teaspoon of baking powder. Get that in there. And a teaspoon of salt. Now I'll just go ahead and mix these together. Just get them all blended in. And then we're going to add the wet ingredients. So for the wet ingredients, I have 3/4 of a cup of beer, and I'm using an IPA, like I mentioned, a New York IPA. And I have a 1/4 cup of buttermilk. And then I have these 2 eggs, which I'm going to go ahead and beat in a separate bowl, mix them together in a separate bowl, and then I'll add those to the mixing bowl. And right now is a perfect time to put these cheese curds into the freezer. So like I said, here's the dry ingredients. It's 1 cup of all-purpose flour, a teaspoon of salt, and a teaspoon of baking powder. Mixed it well together. Now it's time to add the wet ingredients. And of course, I'll put all these ingredients in the information section below, as well as on my website, thehouseholdchef.com. Anyway, I have a 1/4 cup of buttermilk. We have 3/4 of a cup of an IPA beer. You can use any beer, but like I said, just make sure it's a beer you would drink. And don't waste it. Yeah, it's all good. Gotta finish the rest, huh? And then we'll put in the egg. Now what we're looking for here is a consistency of like a pancake batter. You want it to be more on the light side, more on the runny side. So you want to blend it all together, mix it well together. The other thing I didn't mention is by adding beer to this batter, you're adding a bit of flavor, and also the carbonation from the beer makes the cheese curds much lighter and fluffier. So this is the perfect consistency. I'm going to let this sit for 10 minutes while I get the oil ready to begin frying our cheese curds. Now, I'm going to use some corn oil. I figured it's a Midwestern thing, right? So I'm going to heat up some corn oil to 375 degrees, and I'm going to use a candy thermometer to make sure it's the perfect temperature. Too hot, it'll burn quickly. Too low, the cheese curds will just start to melt and ooze out. So 375 is what I found to be the perfect temperature. So I took my curds out of the freezer, dropped them into my batter. And it's important to use a slotted spoon here because we do not want a bunch of the excess batter into that oil. We're going to shake off as much of the batter as possible, and then we'll just drop it into the oil for about 1.5 to 2 minutes till it's golden brown. So if I do get a little bit of the extra batter in there, I'm going to go ahead and skim it out with this strainer. And I want to make sure they don't clump together as well as we cook them to a nice golden brown. And adjusting the temperature, I see it's dropped a little about 360, so I'll add a little bit of heat here. So keep monitoring that temperature, try and keep it as close as you can to 375. I did have a little bit of a failure on one. You're not going to get perfect every time, but I'm doing pretty good. So discard any excess batter, just give it a... There we go, beautiful. I set them on a nice drying rack.